Welcome to the Otherweb. Our guest today is Jeff Ward. Jeff is a journalist, a columnist, a radio show host, and a political campaign manager who specializes in local elections. Mayors, county chairmen, sheriffs, judges, etc. We reached out to Jeff to understand the connection between journalism and local politics and how both are evolving over time. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Alex. I love doing podcasts.
Well, it's good to have you on. So you're a journalist and a campaign manager. How do these two intersect?
Well, one led to the other. Yeah, I mean, it's totally strange how it happened. I mean, Mike Royko is a huge hero of mine, former Pulitzer Prize-winning opinion columnist for the Daily News, the Sun-Times, and the Chicago Tribune. I wrote an email to an editor, never considering that it might be published, taking him to task on his theory on the whole Plan B pill thing. And he published it without my permission. So I told him I wouldn't sue him if he gave me a weekly column. I was just about to get hired to do that when the other columnists they have did get them sued. So I eventually went on to work for the Chicago Sun-Times suburban papers. And as, of course, great timing, the print depression continues, print media depression. Mm-hmm. And so I was, told at first, don't do your own reporting, work with reporters. Then I was told, do your own reporting. And as the political guys, the really talented ones left, and they were the first ones to leave, I started political reporting on my own. That led to people asking me to run their campaigns. So I leapt into that. So that's actually a pretty short version of a long story. But that's how it happened. And I still write on my own at thefirstward.net, all spelled out. And I just ran a judicial campaign behind the scenes. And as soon as you and I are finished, I have to write a kind of quasi-proposal for the Kane County Democratic Party to help them, because the Republicans really aggravated the you-know-what out of me as a journalist. It's like, Alex, you know this. Don't argue with someone who buys virtual ink by the barrel. So there we go. So, one led to the other, and I'm doing both. And in my columns, if I am working for somebody and that comes up, I say, hey, take it with a grain of salt because I'm getting paid or I'm advising this person or whatever. So that's essentially how it happened.
So I'm curious about one of the transitions you mentioned. You mentioned you were writing a column, you were doing your own political reporting, and then somebody asked you to run a campaign. Does this happen very often, that just reporting on political things causes that request?
More often than you think, partly because journalism, if you want to make a small fortune in the journalism industry, start with a large one. So you've got, one of my favorite reporters works at Meijer on the weekend, big, huge grocery store around here, for the insurance. So I'm not nearly the only one who's made that transition. However, I am way more successful than any of those folks. I don't know why, but they don't turn. Maybe it's the ego, and I've never had one in the writing regard, but most of them don't do all that well with campaigns. They don't last very long. My issue is I work for both sides, so neither side trusts me. So,
though that might be an advantage.
Well, it isn't for my peace of mind, state of mind. But and there's some candidates I just couldn't work for. Stupidity is not a virtue, Alex. And those types of candidates tend to avoid me because they've read what I've written. So it all works out. But I got the Kane County Sheriff elected, the Kane County State's Attorney elected. That helps when you've done battles with law enforcement over stuff you've written. Not many. And then the Mayor of Aurora, which we won't talk about that when everybody makes mistakes. Sure. He ran for governor and got slaughtered. There's at 65, there are days I go, bleep it. I'm done. This is a young man's game. And then somebody aggravates me, or, it's when you're good at something, and I have a 70% track record. When you're good at something, it's kind of hard to let it go. So,
do you ever run a campaign just out of spite because
oh
you
yeah,
want your opponent to lose?
the mayor of Aurora. Yes, my good friend Linda Chapelavia did not keep a promise. She was a state rep at the time here in Illinois. And, in the political game, it's a lot of kissy kissy. It's like Hollywood. Kissy kissy, huggy huggy. Oh, sure, I'm going to help you. And then they don't. Well, I wasn't going to let her get away with it because I had helped her a lot at no charge. And we got into it. And I jokingly told put on Facebook. And, again, I'm a satirical, of course, satire and hyperbole are very dangerous arts these days. So I wrote on Facebook, and after I finished murdering Linda Chapelavia, you could be my attorney to an attorney friend of mine. Well, she saw it, and she called the director of the Illinois State Police on me. They show up. Of course, she didn't tell them anything. And so they're like, have you, what, you and Linda have been friends for 7 years? I'm like, yeah. What? You're an opinion columnist? I go, yeah. And it's easy to prove. Oh, you do a radio show? Yeah. Oh, they were so pissed at her. But I was so blinded by my anger to her, I didn't see the warning signs with Richard Irvin. And talk about corrupt. Oh. So, yes, I have done that, and I've learned not to.
All right.
The Kane County Republicans have aggravated me going after me, but I really like Mark Gately, the Kane County Democratic chairman. So working for them, a little spite, but more, I really enjoy Mark, and I could work with him quite well. So I hope that answers your question. Yes, don't do it. It always turns out bad.
All right. We mentioned a few industries so far. So you talked about print journalism. That one is not doing well.
Right.
We talked about politics. And at least on a national level, we seem to be getting bad candidates, but at least the industry is booming. They're making a lot of money. What is the local politics looking like these days?
Well, it's, again, nobody wants to pay, and that's part of the problem. And I'm not cheap, which is why I'm angling for working for the party this time instead of just one or two candidates. That, the saying used to go, and I forgot who said it, is all politics is local. It's not anymore. I mean, Donald Trump, for better or worse, has had a profound effect on local politics. And so it's become, when I started in writing for the Sun-Times, yeah, that's right, in 2006, all these folks got along. They may have their things. I got along with everybody. It was a lot of fun. I mean, I had a couple of years, I always dreamed of working in a newsroom that Mike Royko used to describe, where everybody's friends and it's a blast. I got that for a little while, even though I worked remotely. So, but, it was already getting bad with the reaction to Barack Obama. Well, I mean, Donald Trump did it in, but it's funny that it's working both ways, and both ways are really odd. Here in Kane County, the Republican Party truly doesn't exist anymore. There's a group called the Warriors, who I make hellacious fun of here in Campton Hills, Illinois, and they've turned the party into a mini Trump group, and they don't win elections. They're going to find out this year, really, that they don't win elections. So you've got the county board almost being co-opted by just two or three candidates. You've got a lot of primarying going on, which never used to happen. Two of the MAGA candidates beat two, 19-year county board members? And when I say beat, I mean by twice the vote. That's never happened before. Granted, neither one of them campaigned a whole heck of a lot. But, being on the county board that long used to be a guarantee that you'd be on it. And now the two candidates, the MAGA candidates that won, are going to lose. I'd be willing to bet any amount of money on it. And I am a sports bettor. So you've got the Democrats have finally learned to keep their mouths shut more often than not. Mark Twain, don't open your mouth. Better to be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. So, the Democrats have finally learned that stupid bleep like birthing people for mother. I don't know if you heard about that one.
Yep.
It's not going to work. And in fact, Tuesday's column was a part 2 on all these terms that progressives are now, like master bedroom is out. I couldn't believe it. And I'm like, oh, no. In our house, it's the master bedroom because the master kicked my sorry white ass out for snoring too much. It is, it's primary bedroom. So they've relaxed on that, and they've gotten much better at letting the MAGA folks hang themselves. Now, it's just the opposite downstate. How do I know this? I mean, in my book, So You Want to Win a Local Election, available on Amazon, a 400-page manual. So it's like having a campaign manager on your desk. I wrote about people that, guys, you got to be sure your mailers go to the right place. Because, we've had some stories of, Kane County mailers landing in DeKalb County, the one to the west of us. And that's not good. Well, in this case, the guy's mailer running for Madison County board chairman ended up 325 miles away in my mailbox. And it was a fascinating story. I've tried to call these people. They're nuts in Southern Illinois, totally nuts. And so, and this guy is running against, again, this time, a non-MAGA Republican primaried him. The mailers go 300 miles away, and the non-MAGA candidate, the MAGA candidate only got 38% of the vote in downstate Illinois. So we're getting some very interesting reactions to the Trumpifization of local politics. A lot more primaries. They're brutal. And then those candidates, though, usually don't win.
So, well, I guess a few things in that. First of all, I should mention that for a while, when I was reading stuff on Twitter because somebody sent me a link, all the ads that I saw were for a Republican Senate candidate in Ohio. And I'm in Texas. So I don't think that was a very good use of their money.
No.
Maybe Twitter screwed this one up, but it sounds to me like that was the Republican Party of Ohio, not localizing their ads correctly. But another thing that is odd to me is that, I live in a suburb of Austin, and I don't know who my mayor is. I don't know who my congressman is. I certainly don't know anybody in the local school board or whatnot. All I know is the governor of the state, and that's only because it's a big state. If I was in a small state, I probably wouldn't even know that.
Shame on you, Alex.
Yes, and I know my national politicians. I think I'm pretty representative, and I read a lot of news, right?
I mean, I knew even school board members, I knew them before I started writing. It's just something I've always followed.
But does it seem like they are just becoming less important to most people? If even somebody who works in the news business like me just doesn't give up?
They're actually becoming more and more important, particularly in Illinois. School board members. I mean, it's partly culture wars. Even the Koch brothers, before one of them perished, started giving to local mayoral and school board races. I mean, they technically affect you more than anything, particularly in Illinois, where schools are almost fully funded by property taxes. So we have some of the highest property taxes in the nation. And that's, can't continue. So you got two things now. You have the parents' two most precious commodities, their money and their children. And that's getting a little nutty. Geneva hasn't gotten that bad. Yeah, I mean, county board. The irony is all the fine MAGA folks are protesting outside of Chick-fil-A, mind you. It's on a busy street, I guess, saying, we don't want Kane County to become a sanctuary county. Well, I wrote, and it hasn't stopped them, by the way, that Republican Governor Bruce Rauner here in Illinois made every county a sanctuary county back in 2017. So the county board can't do a damn thing. The county board can't say, no, state, we're not going to follow your rules. So you get that kind of, so now the county board is in the news more and more. So here in Kane County, politicians really have taken on a bit more importance because of the strong feelings by the MAGA folks and the anti-MAGA folks. Although, the MAGA folks are a bit nuts, but progressives can be almost equally as nutty.
Right. So that's kind of the dissonance I'm seeing, right? That it seems like local politicians are important because they make decisions that affect local things. But the way that people run their campaigns is mostly how much do I like Trump or how much do I hate Trump? And It's not about those local issues anymore. Can that be reversed?
Oh, it'll eventually completely implode. Oh, absolutely. I mean, and again, I've written for years about the federal rules, federal politicians. They're meaningless. They're the ones we should forget. They have no real, every now and then, certainly Roe v. Wade, every now and then they'll do something good or stupid. But
and those were technically not politicians doing that, right?
Well, the politicians were behind the reversal. It was a poorly written law. And, I just briefly, I have a very good friend whose father was huge, the anti-abortion guy in Illinois. And I kept telling him, I'm like, oh, great, I can't remember his name. Hey, the second abortion becomes illegal again, abortion has tanked. They have gone down every year significantly. Well, guess what? They're going back up because the minute you forbid something, that's what happens. But back to the core question, the issues have become greater, but it can't sustain itself. This isn't like the counterculture movement of the 60s, which died, but it lived on in a lot of ways. So it never has been. McCarthyism couldn't sustain itself in the early 50s. So eventually we're going to have to get back to fixing our streets and, keeping the power on, which are what we really care about here, most voters. So no. And plus the MAGA folks can't win in Illinois, and they haven't figured that out.
That is the optimistic view. The pessimistic view is that you have countries that for 100 years couldn't start focusing on useful things. Like take Argentina, peaked in the 1920s. And then every decade they have a new red herring to chase.
Exactly.
Right? And maybe now I have some hope with somebody who's at least trying to fix stuff, but I don't know if he'll survive the next few years.
But it's in some cases, Alex, it's a matter of tradition. And I'm going to put my foot in it. And Hispanic, Latin American countries have a unique way of governing that's existed since they, were colonized and formed countries. And it's never changed. Getting those folks who've migrated here to vote is nearly impossible because they don't believe elections mean anything. Their sons and daughters are starting to vote. So, but the U.S. has a history of peaceful transitions of power and generally calm politics, and we will go back to that. This is just the pendulum swinging. But yeah, and then there's, you look at some of the dictatorships in Eastern Europe still. The democracy there lasted a heartbeat, and we're right back, the exception of Poland.
There's few exceptions. I was still in Moldova up until yesterday, right? I visited them for a week. And Moldova is looking okay for now, although they are talking about having a referendum about potentially joining forces back with Russia. And the Russian propaganda is apparently picking sort of weak locales that don't follow the news too much and starting to brainwash them to try to vote for that, even though it's not in their interest. And I'm listening to this, I'm like, okay, if this were 2013, I would sort of believe you that some people buy that stuff. How can people be buying this now?
Again, there's Trump fatigue, seeping in already. He is pissed as shit that nobody's coming out to support him at the trial in New York, and he's trying to blame the police for blocking protesters. No, people are tired of Donald Trump's act. it's still, we still have the us versus them mentality in national politics, so that still exists. And that's going to take a much longer time to wind down. But people get tired of it. In my book, one of the main things I say is negative campaigns don't work on the local level. I've never run a negative campaign, and I never will. You're the president, your senator, they're a nebulous force. You never meet them personally. I mean, my cell phone number, 20 some years ago, it was doled out to a MAGA, before MAGA was a thing, deadbeat woman. And you should see the texts I get, from mostly the Trump folks. And it's just geared towards the other side sucks. We have to win or we all die. So there's still some of that, but it's not going to continue. It never has in America.
I mean, oddly enough, I've never voted in the U.S., but I also get texts from both sides. I don't know how they got my cell phone. Probably it's somewhere on the voter rolls. But I keep getting texts that typically do look like Republicans are going to ban all abortions. Please help, right? Or Democrats are going to take our guns away. Please help. And I'm thinking, well, I do own guns. I'm not about to get an abortion myself. So I'm not sure why I'm getting those messages.
Well, it's trying to rile up the faithful, but still, I mean, and at the, and at the same time, we're having this kind of hyper partisanship, Kane more and more. I mean, the people that considered themselves independents in Kane County maybe numbered 5,000. Now I know the data pretty well. Well, now it's over 100,000. So, there are a slew of intelligent people who are backing away from it. The problem is the diehards vote in primaries and the reasonable people don't. I've never lost a primary. I'm 4 for 4 because I know exactly who votes and I know exactly how to get to them. But it shocked me that a 19-year county board member and a 17-year county board member lost to MAGA upstarts 2-1. But they're going to lose probably by the same amount to their Democratic opponents. Because, in 2020, November was my worst night as a campaign manager. I won 1 election, lost 3. And I lost the 3, and I did way better. I mean, most of the Republicans, countywide Republicans, lost by 15,000 votes. Mine lost by 2 or 3. But the issue was 50,000 Kane Countyans who had never voted before voted, and most of them voted against Trump. How do you reach? It was 40,000 new voters. The other 10,000 simply were registered and never voted. How do you reach 40,000 new voters? So that's going to happen again, at least here. And I don't think a single Republican is going to win. Not only that, but I likely will be working for the Democratic Party, and I don't like losing. So it's going to fade, Alex. It will. I trust me.
Well, I certainly hope so. And again, I hope that the craziness from both sides will fail, including what you're seeing in Columbia University, etc. I'm hoping all of that will fade over time and we'll go back to normal.
That's going to be Tuesday's column. That's progressive, that's the flip side of the MAGA coin coming home to roost. If it was me, I'd tell those little shits you have 2 hours to get out of here or you're expelled. That's it.
Well, it seems like Texas did something very similar recently at the UT. So,
yeah, Harvard, or was it Yale, did something. In any event, but if we start talking about that, that's what.
Well, and I should be especially careful with that because I am Israeli and I try not to talk about things where I am clearly going to be biased. So,
I used to work in Northbrook, Illinois, and back when I had hair and I was in my 20s, I was not terrible looking, but as you can see, all the Jewish mothers who worked in the office tried to fix me up with their daughters until they found out I was raised Catholic. That ended it really quick. So I have been mistaken for being Jewish my entire life. And I never correct anyone. But anyway, and I'm very pro-Israel as a military historian. I don't what Netanyahu's doing. I think I understand it, but it's only creating more terrorists. The failure was in not seeing this coming. Now you have to deal with it as effectively as you can.
Yep.
But the Palestinian protesters, it's like, well, Gaza kills gays. Women can't go out on their own. They kill their own people if they speak out against them. I mean, you're supporting one of the worst regimes on the planet. I understand Vietnam War protests. I was young, but I understood them. I don't get this, Alex. But anyway, we're getting a little off topic.
Yeah. It does look like Gays for Palestine is the equivalent of turkeys for Thanksgiving or something like that.
Right.
All right. So leaving that aside, local politics is important. How do we get more people involved? How do we get people to be more knowledgeable about it? How do we even get, since you're a journalist, I have to ask this, how do we get people to read local news again? Because it seems like it's essentially dying.
Okay, I'm going to try to remember all the questions, but I might. How do you get people to read local news again? You don't. Social media, print media was already going out, but social media has supplanted it. And I could spend my entire day confronting hoaxes, which I usually get angry enough to do, and trying to correct falsehoods. I mean, I have a following, but it's not huge. How do we get people interested? Sadly, we're getting people interested because of the hyperpartisanship. And to be fair, you look at some of these school boards and teachers. My wife's a teacher, by the way. I like to say that, 30 some years of living with me has prepared her for middle schoolers. But they do. I've seen some stuff that I just, if I had hair, I want to pull it out. The gender-bred individual. They're now teaching gender fluid stuff in school. And I'm like...
Yeah, I should mention, having seen my nephew's school program, not only are they teaching it, but you can opt out of any other sex ed class except gender theory. That one is mandatory.
Well, it's like, no. What's happened is because parents think school should raise our kids, they have now thought, well, we should. And it's kind of a noblesse oblige, holier than thou, and they're not focusing on what they should be focusing on. And some of the stuff is insane. Again, it's not that I don't want my kids knowing it. It's not your job to teach it. It's my job as a parent. Sex ed, of course. But the rest of the stuff, and some of it, like DeSantis, Florida's Don't Say Gay law. That's totally misrepresented. Of course he went too far because he always does. But it was simply, can't we let third graders be third graders for a little while longer? So sadly, though, that kind of thing on both sides has generated far more interest in local politics. I mean, we shattered the Kane County voting record in 2020. Shattered. I mean, it's like 60,000 more voters. You don't see that. So there is more interest. The problem is, will that be sustained Trump is going to be convicted of something. He is going to leave the scene. It's going to create a huge vacuum. He's very few people have the, magnetic personality he does to pull it off. Very few people are movement candidates. I've only seen a handful in my lifetime. But then when you get rid of that, the interest tends to fade. And getting people to run, local government is so labor intensive and generally pays so little. You're not going to do it. I mean, the sane people like me, go, I'm not running. I'm not going to subject myself to this kind of crap. And that's not as bad as at the national level. And I don't have that kind of time and energy. I mean, school board, you don't get paid for something that can be, if done right, almost a full-time job. You got to understand the finances. You got to understand what's happening. You got to understand your constituents.
So sorry to interrupt, but that in itself sounds like a problem, because essentially you're selecting for people who are doing it for the ideology. So only extremists would run.
That's happening a little more. But there still are people that want to have a positive effect. And running for school board, because there's no money involved, and by the way, that's the law in Illinois. You can't pay school board members. Does draw people to do so, but fewer are doing it. County board pays $25,000 a year plus benefits. That tends to draw more people. But here in Geneva, the aldermen, they get $3,500 a year. The mayor with a liquor commission gets about $18,000, and it's a lot of work. So I almost think that we should, it should be retired people who run for these offices, people with experience, people who've seen the crap come and go, people who have the time.
Sounds like we have retired people running the Senate and running for president for the most part. So it works
right, but again, now we're talking. Now remember, not all politics is local, so that's a whole different perspective. And again, hyperpartisan is at its peak in Washington D.C. To get to read the local papers, it's not going to happen. The talent left first. I worked with some incredibly talented people. Not only one is left at the Daily Herald. And that's the reporter that has to work an extra job. And so, they think that cutting back is the answer. But every time they cut back, they cover less and they lose readers. I mean, they wouldn't even consider hiring me back when I was still open to the possibility. Because, you're too controversial. Well, they don't understand. That's what sells. I'm not controversial for controversy's sake, but I'll say exactly what's on my mind, and it just doesn't happen anymore. So now you have social media filling that void, and you get things like the guy puts a post up. Look at what gas prices have jumped. 80 cents. Joe Biden and his goddamn inflation. I'm like, dude, oil prices, no president can affect oil prices. But maybe in the short term, releasing stuff from the strategic reserve. What affects oil prices is supply and demand, refinery capacity, and fear. And we got a lot of fear right now with Israel and Iraq going at each other. I'm shocked gas prices aren't higher. But when I said that to him, and, people agreed, he just started calling me an asshole and blocked me. So that's what you're getting. I don't know what the answer is. I try to do my part by putting out cogent stuff with a lot of humor. At least I hope so. But I've sacrificed the following I could have had. I can't by going partisan. I just can't do it. Both sides are full of lunkheads, and they don't always deserve my support. So I don't know. Things need to calm down to get more people to run. And like I said, I believe they will. I thought it would have happened already. And I think we're going to have to pay more for larger salaries for local offices to get good people to give it a shot.
All right. So I guess one last, perhaps the most difficult question so far that I want to go to is, if local politics doesn't pay that much, and if a lot more and more people are becoming cynical because they think that voting maybe doesn't even matter or something like that, or they're focused on national issues, that seems like it's going to breed more corruption. And you already mentioned there is some corruption, Aurora being the example, right? So the question is this a downward spiral that doesn't end, right? Because people's expectations are set lower if they see corruption. And if their expectations are low, then there's more corruption.
I suppose it could be. But, the reason I used to say to people, well, neighbors, people would still say to me, hey, are you going to write about this? And I go, no, I can't affect it positively. There's some levels of stupidity you just can't tackle. So if I didn't believe in positive change, I wouldn't do what I do. I mean, the state's attorney candidate has disappointed me, but she's a heck of a lot better than her Republican opponent would have been. The sheriff has done a great job. Everything he said he'd do, he's done. So those are positive things where that I enjoy. Writing, I've chased the state's attorney out of office. I've chased a sadistic judge out of family court. Doesn't happen very often. I've won 6 out of 7 FOIA appeals, Freedom of Information Act, set precedent. So there is a positive angle. But what you're saying is also true. I mean, there's a city here in the suburbs called Dalton, Dolton, and it's making national news. I mean, they're paying each other. And by the way, the great thing is it's an entirely black city government, which proves they've made it, because they're every bit as terrible as the whites were. And it's incredible what's going on. The FBI is raiding their offices. They're suing each other. It's hilarious. And that's because there's no local paper to pay attention. They went so far, and we're talking, I believe, a city of 10,000 people. But they went so far, Alex, it got the Tribune interested. So there's still those possibilities. But when you're in a more rural area, But
I mean, a paper is obviously one parameter, but it seems to me like expectations would be the main thing, right? When in Finland, the prime minister sets up her son-in-law to have some sort of a menial government job, she's chased out of office, right? When in Iceland, the prime minister is found out to have a foreign bank account during the Panama Papers thing, he's chased out of office immediately. In the US, if this were the standard, I don't think we'd have any politicians left. Right.
Not national ones, probably not. And it used to be the standard, but it isn't anymore.
So it seems to be driven by people's expectations. People in the US just say, he set up his son to have a cushy job. That's normal. Everybody does it. Let's look the other way.
And if it's a menial job, I don't think she should have resigned. We had Bill Daley on the radio show one time, one of our best guests. Bill Daley, the brother of the more recent Mayor Daley. And he said something that I firmly believe in. Not all patronage is bad. You want to hire people you know. You want to hire people who you know will do a good job. I was hired I worked for the county clerk for a couple of years. Still kept writing throughout that time. I'm still friends with Jack. And I did a really good job for him and straightened a lot of things out.
Is there an argument for allowing that in private companies, but not if you're a government employee and you're dealing with other people's money, and therefore you have to show your paper trail?
Yeah, the argument is you got to hire competent people. Period. The only time it really comes out is if you hire your brother and he screws up. Or there's times I've caught on to some things I really don't like, and I've published them. But you're right, it doesn't matter as much. The corruption, when you got a former president, and a contender who's just believes the law doesn't apply to him, Donald Trump, it does set a very low standard. And that's where it is right now. But still, I'm friends with a lot of these people. And most of them are generally good people who want to do good things at the local level. Believe it or not. Dalton it's a hilarious example of how far it can go when nobody's watching.
I want to end on something optimistic. So where do we go from here?
Let's do that.
How can we make politics in the US great again? To use a phrase from somebody you don't like.
Well, number one, let's get back to wanting to get the job done. Let's drop the hyperpartisanship. Let's drop the hyperbole. Let's leave that to the journalist. And let's get back to running government. And let's drop the identity politics. I don't care. I don't care. It's like I just wrote about, one of the terms. Yeah, I did a 2-part column recently on thefirstword.net again on terms I refuse to use, the progressives coined. And, cisgender, which just is insane. And, it's like the content of your character, the least impact on that is your sexuality. I don't want to know. I don't need to know. So, clearly, if you're black, I'm going to notice. But all the rest of the stuff, I just don't care. I don't want to see my neighbors in a carnal embrace. The thought is actually kind of terrifying considering how overweight most of them are. So I don't know why we get hung up on that. We got to stop getting hung up on identity politics.
No, sorry to interrupt here, but I should mention every time I see a sentence start with the words as a, I stop reading and I skip to the next sentence. I basically don't want to, like, if you had something useful to say, you would not start with something about yourself.
I will do that as a journalist to give myself credibility. But I don't go, or I'll joke as a Caucasian. But yeah, I agree with you. That's number one. Number two, I think schools, and they have enough to do already, but there needs to be more classes, that cover local government. Especially in high school. You can opt for poli-sci in college. Number three, pay local elected officials a bit more to draw better people. Number four, care about the truth. Right now the truth, it doesn't really matter much. It's how you spin it. And I think the truth matters. And so that would do it as well. The hyperpartisanship, I think, really has to pass before people get interested again. I don't like, I wish I had a better answer for that one, but I look at it and, sometimes I want to bang my head against the wall. That won't get me anywhere either. But, and then...
Might be more enjoyable than watching the news.
Yeah, which I don't do. I'll watch The Daily Show. And then, you get Jeff Ward writing about you, but only if you screw up in a major way. There's one of the county board members that lost was constantly asleep on the dais. And privately, I said, Mike, you keep doing it, I'm going to write about it. And he kept doing it. And so you do it. And I always try to fix it before I take them on. But because I know it's difficult, those jobs are exceedingly difficult. And I'm one of the few writers that'll praise a politician for doing the right thing. Another thing, is better county party organizations. The Kane County Republican Party no longer exists. All the good ones, all the ones that I grew up with as a journalist in my 40s and 50s are gone. And that's because it's been handed over to the MAGA folks. However, the Kane County Democratic Party, Mark Gately, the chairman, is the best county chairman I've ever encountered anywhere in my lifetime. He pulls people together. He herds cats. He makes it work. He gets money from the main party, the Central Democratic Party of Illinois, and that draws better people in general. Not the loons we're seeing on the Republican side. So get precinct committeemen elected. PCs, they're the worker bees. You need 10 signatures. Yeah, but 2/3 of those roles of those offices are vacant here in Kane County. If you have an organization, you're going to draw more people. And, in Chicago, the precinct committeeman used to be king during the halcyon machine days. You're making me think. I like that. But the last two, I think, are the most critical and the most doable. You and I can't affect, I rage against the rhetoric, but I'm not going to single-handedly change it. Saying pay politicians more, elected officials more, just not a very popular stance. However, a more efficient county party organization. Look at what Chicago can still do. It was huge news when the machine candidate for state's attorney lost. And it turned out to be only by about 2,000 votes, but the non-machine candidate won. So that's also what's lacking, Alex. And I'm not talking corrupt. The Kane County Democratic Party isn't corrupt. They're just very well organized. And so what's happened is Kane County, when I moved here in 1997, was wholly Republican. The real election was the Republican primary. Well, people are tired of Cook County, Chicago, taxes. So they have escaped to Kane County. And then the radicalization of the Republican Party by Donald Trump, the anti-Obama folks, we were going to 1% to 2% more Democratic with each even year election. But Trump has ended it. So now, in my short time here in Kane County, 27 years, the county's fully Democratic. Why? Because the Democrats are far better organized. And Mark is primarily responsible for that. So that's a bit of a long answer. But what the Republicans don't get here in Kane County, and they're starting to kind of get it, you got to, nothing, if you're not winning, if you're not getting people elected, how are you going to draw good people to run? Occasionally you'll get someone who wants to do it, who's always wanted to do it. But, right down to, a reasonable city organization. If you want to run for school board or alderman, there you go. Ooh.
Yeah, so it sounds like our prescription at the end of this episode for local politics is pay better and organize better.
Right.
And for national politics, it's wait it out.
Exactly. I mean, we did the pendulum doth swing. That is one of the quotes I use in columns all the time. The pendulum doth, it's going to swing. And partly what we're seeing is a reaction to rampant progressivism. When you have Elizabeth Warren saying, I'm not going to hire a Secretary of Education until they're vetted by a trans high school student. And you just want to go, well, I'm going to say, what the fuck? And that just doesn't help. But so now the pendulum has swung. It opened the door to Donald Trump. And it will swing back and then, finally hit center.
Or it will just accelerate the swings and start spinning around.
It's always possible, but that's never been the United States. We've never been that country. What I think the main instigator for what we're seeing now, Alex, is social media. As a friend, a comedian, I wish I could remember his name. He's not one of the A-listers. I think he should be. Did a hilarious bit on, we've always had stupid people. We always have. The problem is social media now allows them to organize. And he's dead on. He goes, you know what? Hey, when your friend Ernie said, I think the earth is flat. You went, shut the fuck up. It's not flat. Don't ever say anything like that again. And that was the end of it. Well, now Ernie gets on social media, says the earth is flat, and now we have the Flat Earth Society, which Netflix did a documentary on. So, but remember when we all got answering machines? And it was really cool. And we all did some silly recording. I did the Twilight phone, with the back music playing from the Twilight Zone in my best Rod Serling imitation. Nobody does that anymore. Now it's your voicemail on your phone. Hey, it's Jeff. Leave a message. So we do have a tendency to float back to normality. And social media, it is a bit of a fad right now, but it's going to plateau out. People are realizing that QAnon is full of shit. They're realizing that the other side, some of the progressives, are full of shit. And eventually we'll get some sort of balance. And it's not going to be as new and not going to have the draw and the power it does right now to spread stupidity. So I think that's the core reason why we're experiencing what we're experiencing. Donald Trump is a symptom. Elizabeth Warren is a symptom. Social media is the disease.
Yep. And the disease basically can be summed up as stupidity is the shiny new thing that everybody's playing with. And we're hoping it will get old.
Well, yesterday's column on, why isn't Caitlin Clark making the $12.16 million, or 6-1, that Victor Wembanyama's making?
Because nobody's watching.
No, because I'm sorry, yes. Nobody's, these male sportscasters, they have to sit silently while the women bitch endlessly about a league that they don't even watch. Now it's changing. Viewership went up 21% between 2022 and 23. But I joke about this, embracing stupidity. Let's look at the economies. $10 billion in revenue for the NBA. That's why Bradley Beal gets $47 million a year on the Suns to totally suck. I never would have paid him that amount. But Caitlin Clark is going into a $200 million a year thing. She's lucky she's getting $72,000. Oh, and the poor lass just signed on with Nike for 8 years, $3.5 million a year. I mean, I joke, and again, the columns of thefirstword.net, I'll do a little advertising. I joke that I'd play center field for the Cubs for $20,000, and I could probably do better than Ian Happ at 65. So, maybe not, but close. So, yeah, I mean, stupidity has become a virtue.
Well, you only get retweeted if you say something controversial. If you just say something that is, reasonable, then who would retweet you?
Yeah, I do not tweet. And in fact, I wouldn't be on social media if it wasn't for I need the exposure as a journalist. It's the primary source of column hits. So,
Well, I don't tweet either. And to anybody listening, if you see me tweeting, that's my team doing that in my name.
Well, especially I wasn't tweeting much before Mr. Musk, but now I don't even want to be associated with that medium. And plus, I'll never forget the county chairman who I helped get elected, former, came to me one day and goes, Jeff, more and more people are telling me I should be on Twitter and have a social media account. And I'm like, Chris, and he tends to speak his mind. I go, Chris, what could possibly go wrong with you putting out your thoughts 5 minutes after they've been formulated? That's all I had to say. He still isn't on. And he's now the treasurer here in Kane County. So, yeah, I mean, stupidity has always passed as a fad in this country. But like I said, Alex, I firmly believe what we're seeing is stupid people can now organize, without their friends. I mean, how can an NBA player who's been in an airplane at 35,000 feet and seen the curvature of the earth, we're on our test, say the earth is flat?
I think Kyrie Irving too. So there's more than one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know. But there's always those folks. But but now they can organize, and now I'm repeating myself, and they'll eventually. It's going to burn out.
And on that optimistic note, thank you so much for joining us. I hope it's going to burn out as well.
Thank you for having me, Alex. This was a lot of fun. You got me thinking. I've done so many of these. Sometimes the answers are canned because there's only so many questions.
Yeah, I don't plan my questions, and I enjoy people thinking. Maybe that's a vice.
Maybe, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeff.
This has been another episode of The Otherweb. Join us next time for more discussions on journalism, politics, and everything in between.